Good evening, everyone. We should ask everyone just to move right down here. Thanks for coming out tonight. I know the weather's a little iffy. We actually have 210 tickets sold to this, but you get to be the lucky ones that get to participate in the small group interaction tonight. So we're glad that you're here. My name's Reese King. I'm the CEO of the Paducah Symphony. And I do know we have some people in the house that bought tickets to this event tonight and may not have realized that those tickets do not cover Saturday night. So if you're planning to come to the Saturday night performance and you only bought tickets to this, I just want to remind you that you do have to have a separate ticket for that. And after you hear what we have in store tonight, I hope you're going to want to come to that Saturday night performance. So President's Day week, and if you don't know the history of President's Day, basically started from George Washington's birthday. But this was very fitting to do this week because of President's Day on Monday and it being the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And you're going to hear a lot about that as we go forward to July 4th. Those of you that were at our America 250 concert back in the fall may remember that what I was told is it is a year-long celebration from July 4th of last year to July 4th of this year. But the majority of that is going to be towards July 4th of this year. But this was a great week for us to do this since we don't have a concert in July and it being President's Day week. The piece that is featured on the concert Saturday is the Ellis Boyer Dream of America, and it's a very powerful piece. And I'm not going to say any more about that because these people up here are going to talk a lot about it tonight. But it is based on the Oral History Project from Ellis Island, and so many, I think, am I correct on this? It's like 1 in 9 of people can trace history to Ellis Island? 40%, wow. So we're going to hear a lot about that tonight. We have Fowler Black, Emily Black, and our maestro, Raffaele, up here. And I'm going to turn it over to them because you don't want to hear me talk, you want to hear them talk. But thank you again for coming tonight, and we will see you Saturday night at the concert. No, you don't.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here with you. I do have a green light.
I've got a green light as well.
Todd is like, I'm working on it. Aha. There we go. We're so glad to be with you tonight, talking about some really wonderful repertoire that we've got coming up in a few days. The 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence is this year, and arts organizations all around the country are having programs that are celebrating this. Pretty much everyone that I know has some sort of America 250 concert happening this year. So I just wanted to pose the first question to Raffaele today. How did you decide on this concert repertoire?
Well, just because of that, I've been wanting to do the Peter Boyer piece for a long time. We've done music of Peter Boyer. Do you guys remember the Rhapsody, the Rhapsody in Red, White, and Blue that we did with Jeffrey Beagle playing the piano part? We did that with the Gershwin Rhapsody in Blue in the same performance. I've always liked Peter, and I've liked his music very much because it has a cinematic quality to it. But yet it's not, and I mean this in a gentle way, it's not fluffy and cheap in any way. It has real core to it, real substance, I think. And this came up just beautifully because Ellis Island topic to me is, although my parents came here in 1955, it had stopped in 54. But still, the immigration is important in my life and powerful. So the piece always was in my mind, and now this is just a perfect time to time it. It just came out at the right time, I think.
And to pair that with the Dvorak, it's I don't know if you meant to do this, but it's brilliant. Ellis Island started processing immigrants in 1892, the same year that Dvorak arrived in New York City.
Absolutely.
Was that a coincidence, or was that just brilliance on the part of
well,
the
first of all,
maestro?
he's a Czech immigrant who came to America to run a conservatory in New York City, and he wrote this piece while he was here, so it just made perfect sense to do this because it wasn't really, well, we can get into it a little bit later, but yeah, we'll get into more of that detail later, but it just seemed to work perfectly because, again, in the balancing of programming for me is the Boyer, you may know or remember him as a composer because we've done him before, we've all experienced it together, and every time you open a book from a different author or you open a different score with a different author, okay, or musical score from a different composer, which I'm using the author term, you're learning about them and their ear and their eye and their personality. So we've done that together. But I can't just do Boyer all night long because that's newness. And we don't always like new. New's tough, right?
New can be tough.
New
Yes.
can be tough for people, and for everybody, for me, right? The second, third time through, the fourth time, and by the time I've studied the score, I'm in love with it. But you only have one experience with it. Is when you show up Saturday night, one experience, and then you walk away with an opinion. Yes, I like it. No, I didn't. And that's not enough time to really make a relationship with a composer or a piece of music or a relationship with a person or a new food or anything, right? So, but the Dvorak I put on there because it's a staple in the orchestral repertoire, and even if you don't know it by title, you'll know it by tune.
And the Dvorak, interesting choice just on the surface. If you don't know Dvorak very well, non-American, but wrote this piece that it might be considered the most American symphony out there. If you've got something that makes Symphony No. 9 American, what is it to you that speaks about the sound of America in that symphony?
That's a great question. Being a Czech composer, coming here, he was really writing a lot of his own folk style in his own country. So the other symphonies, especially even 6, 7, and 8, primarily really are folk music from his culture, from his people, okay? And wrote with great pride and nationalism and the whole thing. But when he arrived here in the U.S., he wanted to break that mold because composers at that period were really writing in a Germanic style. So, of course, we all want to write a Brahms symphony. We all want to write a Beethoven symphony because they had some success. And there's something there that we're still trying to put our finger on. Why are we compelled to listen to a Brahms symphony? Why is it Beethoven tapped into something that we all love and emulate and are trying to share, all the time through? But he wanted to write what he thought would be an American symphony. So this is where you're at, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I think it was because of his influence or the idea of African American spirituals definitely had something to do with this. And you can actually hear some of the idioms and the motifs and the ideas within it. Also, Native American elements to it, although he doesn't really ever directly quote anything that would be familiar. But I think in the third movement, for example, the rhythm, if you're familiar with that scherzo, it's in one, but it's a 3/4 feel, so it's all the way through. And I think that probably has some drumming element to it from the Native American music. So I think what he was trying to do is capture and experience that, like when you go to a different country and you're trying to, when you go to Japan, you want to eat Japanese food. You don't want to go there and order a cheeseburger, right? Although it's a good idea. You don't go to Italy for sushi, unfortunately, But the idea is you want to capture the culture, but he also thought he wanted to write what we think American music would be. And it probably is in the openness of the chords. He probably wrote it very open, very expansive, and we can talk a little bit more later about each movement and how it pieces together. But I think that if I can answer that question with what he was trying to do with the African American spirituals and the Native American music.
Yeah, absolutely. In our looking at the Dvorak and preparing for tonight, it was really incredible to, well, really read about the National Conservatory of Music. I didn't know much of the history of that, but one of the people that he sort of saddled up with was a student there, Harry T. Burley. And he's an African-American gentleman who was there at that time. And Dvorak first heard spirituals arranged by him at that school and asked Harry to sing some songs for him. And so that was really influential for him, I think, in developing this New World Symphony. If you're a choral person or an art song person, you've probably sung some Harry T. Burley. I know I have a lot, and so that was really interesting. Do you remember the first time you heard the New World Symphony?
I don't remember the first time I heard it. I think I heard it before I knew what it was. You know, like I said, you probably will recognize all the melodies or the tunes of it, because if you don't play this in the Vivaldi's, you know, every 15 seconds on an NPR or a radio station, you lose your funding because it's one of those top 20 hits. Although I will say this behind enclosed locked doors, and you can't say this to anybody else, I'm not sure if it's his best symphony.
His most popular, but maybe not his best.
Popular for sure, because we identify with the tunes, and I think because it has a title to it, it gets more airplay actually. But it is a beautiful piece. It has beautiful elements. What I mean by that is I think 6, 7, and 8 are better structured musically. I think thematic development, introductions of themes, modulations, and overall balance of symphony. You know, thinking from a composition, from a conducting standpoint, orchestrally, I think those are better symphonies, but this definitely tears at your heart more. And that's what makes it beautiful.
I think you all will probably remember the Largo once it gets there. That's been set to text as well and has been sung many times. But yeah, I think the really singable melodies that he has in the Dvorak. Is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of the movements and how they work together, and what to expect on Saturday night?
Or sing us a couple of the couple of the themes from Dvorak.
La da 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 dee da da. Everybody, la da 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 da. Yeah, you're gonna know and love it. It's beautiful. You know, that second movement you just mentioned, when I read about him and his idea of the symphony and his ideas with the symphony, that was him feeling homesick for his country. So while he was here, and this ties in beautifully with the first piece, with the Ellis Island, because, you know, we talk about the land of opportunity. My parents came here with the idea that they heard there was gold on the streets. Everybody had big cars. Everybody was working. Everybody was eating. So what a great time to leave Italy and go back with all that money in your suitcase in a couple of years and feed the family. You know, that was the idea. But we don't really remember, bless you, they don't really remember that these people left everything behind. You left your mother and your father. You left whatever you had as a boy or a girl, in your friends, your culture. Although you're going to some land of opportunity and all this newness and greatness, and with this great hope and joy and vision in front of you, there's some sorrow and baggage that you've left behind, for sure. And I can see that even my parents, when they left the family for this new opportunity. So this second movement is really him being homesick and missing his homeland. That's why the second movement really is a Czech piece. Where the outer first and last movement, not the third, because the third really is that the Native American element to it that he tried to capture for Americana, that whole thing. The first and last movement really are wild American themes and what he thought were going to be the American symphony, which were really good bookends to the whole thing.
Yeah, and do you feel like when you were talking about the expansiveness of his writing, that laid some foundation for Copland, for instance, and his chordal and quintal harmonies that he uses, and just this idea that the possibilities are endless. There's expanse. There's just all of this hope.
Absolutely. It's always that. It's that openness of chords. Copeland did that really, really well. And I don't know how a good Jewish kid from Brooklyn could do that, because I don't think he ever went past the Mississippi. But, the open chords, it's something with the ear and our perception of that harmonization that is different. Don't you agree?
100%.
But
yeah.
yet, I don't consider Dvorak to be a vocal composer so much, but I think him to be a very vocal in the line type of composer. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Now, whether it's a beautiful soprano singing it or a beautiful baritone voice singing it, he was a violist, Dvorak. So therefore, I find, like in Brahms, which he was trying to break the mold, that inner voice in the strings, in that motor, the violist never really gets the credit. It's always the first violins who get the theme. They get the big praise. But the viola oftentimes has the motor of the piece. They're often playing, which is the inner heartbeat, the rhythm of the piece, right? And therefore, he does that very well, because as a violist, it's a very thick inner voicing. And I find the same throughout all that symphony. And that's probably why I gravitated musically to it also.
That openness, I'm going to make a really, probably a not very, very good seamless transition here, but openness. Dvorak was impressed with the prairie, the openness, talking about going past the Mississippi, ended the composition of the World Symphony in Iowa. Spillville, Iowa, I believe, is a Czech community, a Czech-speaking community, and he actually was very taken by the prairie portion of the terrain and the topography of that portion of America. I don't think that he spent a long time in Iowa, but he was able to finish the piece there. Right. I wonder if that openness has any connection. Speaking to the language of the topography of America. But with that, anything else about Dvorak? Any questions about Dvorak here that we're kind of splashing and dashing a little bit, but we don't want to dash too quickly if you've still got a curiosity or two. All right. Yeah.
I don't know that story. Unsure.
All of us are.
Well, we need to talk about the Boyer, and it's been just a pleasure to dig into this as narrators. I've done narration one other time with the Paducah Symphony, the first time I sang with you all in Christmas several years ago, but it's a whole other experience speaking text with an orchestra than it is to sing. And boy, this text is powerful. So it's unusual in that there is speaking along with this orchestral bit. Can you speak a little bit about, are there other orchestral pieces? There aren't that many that have narrator with them. And what's the advantage to that?
And with the spoken word being generally free of rhythm, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah, there's really no relationship to it at all. It's just a little bit, there's timing, but not relationship rhythmically. Although the Copland, speaking of Copland again, with Lincoln, his Lincoln portrait, the whole thing with the text and things, which is a very, very powerful piece also. This is beautiful. Actually, you don't remember, the first youth concert the two of you, I asked you to do many, many years ago was Mozart Now and Then. And you were the young Mozart, and Fowler, you were the older, real Mozart. Oh, you were a hip-hop kid, remember? and you came in on skates, and you were listening to your iPad and the whole thing. And we did a Mozart Symphony number 1 and then Mozart Symphony number 41. And by the end of the whole program, you had switched. You liked her music and vice versa. Remember the whole thing. So you did do acting before. So I know you both as great artists musically, vocally. Okay, but I also know you're great actors. Okay, and you've proven that here in the community through the Market House Theater and everything you've done. So to ask you to do this was really a no-brainer for me, but also a real pleasure. So thank you for accepting to do it. Because words are powerful. And beginning as of course, I was an orchestral player, but when I began conducting and study with Giuseppe Sinope in Italy, my first job in Siena, Italy, and for 5 years, I became an operatic conductor in Italy. And I figured, what a great way to bring my life back to Italy and my heritage and my language and the whole thing and the culture. But in realizing that and working with singers and with texts, of course, working with Verdi or Puccini and any of those great composers, we're talking about a narration that was antique. So some of those Italian verbs or idioms or nuances and subtleties in language, because language is always changing, okay, were something I had to really learn and figure out. And then you have to also figure out, these are texts of people that they may have come here as a little child, but they were interviewed years later, right? So sometimes, have you ever gone through an experience and it wasn't so great, but 30 years you can laugh at it or look back on it and find something about it? But it also, the story seems to change a little bit too. I don't know if there's a healing process. We tend to forget some of the negativity and some of the things, and
or things get embellished somehow.
Right, right. It was actually better than it was. You know what I mean? It's possible. But subtlety in language, was it translated correctly? Was it interpreted right? Was it meant to be that way? Did they have enough language skill to mean what they really meant? You know what I mean, kind of thing? So it's very, very interesting text, because in speaking to Peter Boyer, even this week, he couldn't, I wanted him to sort of do something with us tonight, but he's doing a premiere in Washington tonight, in Washington, D.C., of another work. But he says, you know, there's some imagery in this, but it didn't influence the music. The text did. He drove everything in this music from the text. So I know you want to talk about that from the narration part of this whole thing, because this piece was written from his, I think he was really powerfully moved. And, you know, I asked him, why did he select these? Because he had hundreds to listen, or he had choices. But why did these few jump out at him? And that's what's interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing. The Ellis Island Oral History Project is, you can really go down into a hole pretty quickly and just be fascinated by it.
And we have.
And yeah, I mean, there were 2,000 interviews conducted in the late 1980s and early 1990s. And of course, at this point, people who were coming through the portal of Ellis Island, they were children, or perhaps they were teenagers, maybe in their early 20s. But by 1980, they would have been in their 80s. You know, so again, you know, looking way back in the past, but having thousands of stories to weed through, and Boyer is able to condense down to 7 stories. That's to distill into this work. And these 7 stories are told. 4 of them are women, 3 of them are men, but they really do cover a good spectrum of experience, and that's why I'm so eager and so glad that you all came tonight to get that context a little bit, and we can dive into this just a little bit, because you know, there are some that are, honestly, they're hard to get through. Speaking it out loud, we spoke it out loud at the kitchen table yesterday, and there were moments where you know, it's pretty emotional stuff. So if you have a child that's 4 years old like we do, and that child is leaving his or her parents, it's pretty in your face. But to know that this was being done time and time and time again, and I believe it was 12 million people that went through Ellis Island from in a 60-year period, late 1800s to the mid 1900s. So to be able to weed all of that down and condense that and distill it into 7 stories would be quite a job.
And as we know, and I know you guys know because of the research you did, which is very in depth, they didn't come across on Carnival Cruise. This wasn't the most ideal situation, and I forget the duration of that trip. How long was it?
Anywhere between 12 and 20.
One of the fellas that
days.
I read is 23 days.
Many people didn't make it. They passed away on the ship. And many people got to Ellis Island, and if you received an X on your back, you were turned away. You may not have even felt it. Somebody could just come by and X your back. You might have thought, because it was so crowded and chaotic, you might have thought somebody just bumped you or touched you or something like that. Next thing you know, you're being ushered out of the country again, and you have to take that 12 or 20 day again back.
And one of the excerpts, one of the stories that dives into that, Maestro, I'm glad you brought it up, just because you get to hear it twice, as he said. Maybe hearing something once, you can take it back, but if you hear it a little, prepare you for it on Saturday. This fella, he happens to venture across in steerage in the very bottom, seasick the whole time, 22 days, and he befriends another 16-year-old and his father, and by the time they get to Ellis Island, the chalk mark that Maestro's speaking of was on 2 of the 3 backs, and the fella telling the story was the one that did not have the chalk mark, and he had to say goodbye to his friend and his friend's father, who were next on board to go back. So if you put yourself in these situations, it's really hard stopping. So.
You said there's 7 narrations to this whole thing, and originally we're doing it the original way that Peter Boyer, the composer, wanted it with only 2 actors. Okay, and he uses the word actor, not narration, not narrators. And there's a difference there because he really wanted it to be actors, people who can dive into without trying to pretend to be those people, because we don't know who they were, even though we can research and say, yes, this was an Italian woman. We don't really know who she was. We can only go by what she said. You know what I mean? Or we don't know who that boy was, or now that older man telling the story was. But they recorded it originally because the director got involved, and then everybody's got their hands involved. There was 7 different characters who tried to do accents, and it really wasn't. I don't think it was really doing it justice. So I'm very pleased that we're doing it the original form, the way the composer wanted it to be.
Yeah, and we feel that same way, and just how impactful that these are real firsthand accounts from real people, and to be able to embody each story is just it's incredibly moving. It has been as we've been preparing for this.
And I think by staying neutral, as a speaker, there are certain advantages to that. You're not putting this person in a box. You are retelling their story. There are pros and cons to both, but we're excited to get to go on the journey with the symphony as it helps bridge each story together. And the prologue, for instance, you set the stage with the thematic, some 2 or 3 themes that are really the main theme, and then I think Boyer commented he really wanted the prologue to speak to everyone saying freedom, freedom, freedom. He wanted, if you could talk through an instrument, that's what he wanted the instruments to say. Can you help us understand how the orchestra is helping the narrators, but also maybe being restrained at points when an orchestra may not be used to that, right?
Yeah, the mood changes, like the characters change, because these people are very different people. They're somehow experiencing the same thing at different times, but they're going through that long journey. and the weather and the disease and the sickness but the hope and the drive and everything was still there. I mean, so there's some commonality to the whole thing, yet each person's personality, their luggage is all different. The families they left are all different, or the families they're going to reunite with, because several of them, I mean thousands of them, had people who had already come. So they're going to meet an uncle or an aunt, although they had no way of communicating with them, because they ended up at Ellis Island with no way to phone, or they apparently didn't have cell phones back then. And they didn't know how to get a hold of them. It was only some families, I think Peter Boyer mentioned to me that in some of his readings and research was, some of them said things like, after 2 weeks of receiving, you receive a letter in those days, if you ever got the letter, by the way, that was already opened and read by somebody. And that's not too long ago. I remember my family, letters were opened in Italy. When you sent them a letter, it was read before they were delivered, just to make sure everything was good, everything's up and up. But, when the uncle realized, hey, this kid didn't show up for 3 weeks, maybe I better go down to Ellis Island to see where he is. And they somehow found him that way. I mean, that's scary. So you might have arrived and then been stuck there till somebody came and got you.
Yes, one of the stories that I tell talks about a young woman who they arrive at Ellis Island and they go through all of the procedures, and they sent a note, a telegram or something to their family, heard no response, and they were stuck on the boat for 6 more days after they had already been there, and there was no food left on the boat, and they were going to have to go back. The officials were telling them, if nobody comes and gets you,
I'll think of
you
that
have
the
to
next
come
time
back.
that I'm stuck on the tarmac in an airplane. I'll think of the 6 days.
That's a good day. To Fowler, answer your question, Boyer really captures this. Like, if you were to watch a film without a soundtrack to it, it would be interesting textually for a while, it'd be visually interesting, but it would be very flat. He captures very beautifully these moments. Like, for example, it does open up with that trumpet call, da 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 da, which is, again, those open fourths and fifths we alluded to earlier with Copeland and that open space and Iowa maybe. And here we are. It's Mayberry with a little bit of an accent, okay? But it's just that very heroic feeling and very triumphant noblism, Americana feel, I think. It's really there. But then again, like, for example, the Italian one with the sick, seasick, the orchestra is actually noodling around, and the score actually says, play whatever you want to play, and all I'm doing is metering different measures. So they're going into different chords and making up their own music. So it's a very contemporary, very confusing, very nauseating. And then with the glissando, which means sliding on the string, which is very, very nauseating, especially if it's supposed to be Brahms or Beethoven, right? But that gives us that real, that boat sensation of that feeling. So Peter's absolutely, like a good film score, like a John Williams or a Morricone or Hans Zimmerman, able to really capture what that text is all about.
And that is, I guess you could describe that as underscoring, right? And underscoring is almost a opportunity for the orchestra to comment on a little, from the background. But that in that same vein, you're also in between movements, bridging and almost giving a foreshadowing of what story is about to be told, right?
Right, exactly right, because it links everything together. It's all pretty much one piece. It's not separate movement, separate movement, separate movement. It's really just one event. Even though there's a fermata and then a change of mood, it's really sequenced together, I believe. I see the whole thing as one large piece. Because I think silence in a piece of music, silence in speech is very powerful. But it is all connected. As actors, just speaking the text, it's has a dimension to it, And it probably has a certain weight to it. I would like to know your feeling about it. And also, how does it feel when the music is with the same text? How does that change for you?
We might find out the hard way. That
Tomorrow
emotion,
night.
That emotion might be amplified. I don't know. But
Yeah, I mean the text is moving enough in itself for many moments, and I'm anticipating tomorrow night when we put it with orchestra and do it all together for the first time in rehearsal that there's going to be some really heavy, beautiful but aching moments. It's just music speaks where words fail, and so this is sort of a beautiful marriage, because you're with these stories, and not all of them are just deathly sad. Some of them are funny and have some interesting anecdotes, but words only go so far to describe what these people really went through, and it only goes so far. And so I think the music adds that heart depth to it, and it allows us to be put fully into their shoes of what their experience was.
And instead of just reading the fact that somebody was from Hungary and they were being occupied by a Romanian military presence, reading that is one thing, but you add a snare drum underneath that, and it just helps bring you to a place. Yes. Yes.
So the thing is as good actors know, you have to be emotional, but you can't be too emotional to let it interrupt the line. It's the same thing for good singing, because you may be crying in an operatic moment, right? But you can never cry because that'll affect the voice in a negative way. So it's the same thing with acting too, because the more I listen to great actors speak in workshops and masterclasses, because I think like good conducting, acting and miming is what I do, because I don't make any sound, right? Less is more, and makes it more powerful. Do you feel that way about these deliveries?
I do, honestly, but speaking these, not being in an actor's shoes with an accent necessarily. I think that it helps honor the text in a certain perspective.
Yeah, and the word conductor can also mean conduit, which I always love that that parallel, and I think that is exactly what a good actor does. You are the conduit. You are the vessel through which something is being told, and that can sometimes affect you.
But don't
really
let it
deeply,
get in the way.
But don't let it get in the way of serving these stories. It's always a tough line to toe for me, especially in singing and in doing things like this. Yeah.
It's one thing to read a book, and your privacy, and you're reading at a rhythm. Everybody reads at a different rhythm, right? But now you have to interpret people's words, and there is a rhythm. There is a rhythm. And Boyer himself has laid out space, not rhythm for you. But it'll say something, and then I have several measures of music, and then there's another quote, another phrase, another idea. So he's giving you text from real people, and all he's done is put a musical tapestry underneath it, a canvas for you to paint on, and just put space there for you to enjoy, but not rhythm.
I was going to ask you this question: if it came as a conductor, I mean, there's an innate feel there. What's it like to conduct? Have you had much experience conducting symphonies with spoken word? And how do you adapt?
Well, not with spoken word, because like we just established earlier, there's not that much out there. But in the operatic world, I see if you take the melody away, it's a spoken text. Okay, it just happens to be the perfect relationship. Everything has to have a marriage between the note and the text. And good composers know how to put the peak at the right place with the right word, because you don't want to emphasize and, but, and that, there's other words like love and other things that are more crucial and more beautiful that you want to put the high note on, right? So I think in this case, but it does this text affects me in the sense of, for example, it'll say this tempo, this dynamic, this idea, color, right, in the orchestra. Everything has to have emotion to it. It might move a little bit if I'm moved by that text, And it's in my head because I've studied it and I know it and I've heard it now and I see it. But you and the way you perform it will actually inspire me to conduct the orchestra in a different way. And I don't know what that'll be yet. Like, you don't know what it'll be yet. And you don't know what it'll be yet because we're going to be making that on the stage live together at the moment. And that's the beauty of a live performance. And you only can get that if you show up. And that's why you're the smart people that came tonight. Because others are going to miss something in this experience together. Because it's not just us talking to you. It's about you all relating to each other there in the audience. And you're going to experience this music, both Dvorak and Boyer, on Saturday night together and go through something. And and you go through something, whether it's good or bad together, like maybe bad weather in January where you have to cancel a concert. We all went through that together. But somehow it makes our lives together more beautiful in a way. I don't want to get into the quilting thing, but that's what it is.
The fabric of America, if you will. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, we want to give enough time so you can get a glimpse of the type of stories that are going to be told. Emily's going to do some singing of art song here that it's going to reflect this same project, the Ellis Island Oral History Project. Boyer was not the only one to set it to music, and Emily has about 5 or 6 short songs that are going to give us an idea of what these stories were like, firsthand, spoken by real people who had trying experiences. So at this point, I want to also bring out Devonda Treese.
Because I can't do this by myself.
That's right.
Ever.
Devonda.
Yes, in preparation for this evening, Reese mentioned, if you all wanted to sing something, have a little bit of a performance aspect of this, that would be great. And I went looking back through my coffers of options and remembered this song cycle. It's called Vignettes, Ellis Island, and it is by American composer Alan Lewis Smith. And he passed away just 3 years ago in 2023. And I had the pleasure of working with Alan Smith in Los Angeles for a couple of summers as a young artist for a program called Songfest. And it was a program primarily about art song. And while I didn't sing these pieces while I was there, I think I coached some Schoenberg with him, actually. I was exposed to these pieces. Somebody else sang a few of them. And I remember being really impacted by just the story of it. There are 30 songs in this entire cycle. I'm not going to do all 30 of them for you this evening, but I've chosen 6. And so I'm going to tell you about the first 3, and then we'll do them all together, and then I'll tell you about the last 3, and we'll do them all together. These are also taken, as Fowler mentioned, from the Ellis Island Oral History Project, and these are really short, tiny little vignettes, tiny little texts, glimpses. And so the first piece is called Anna. They all have the name of the person who is speaking as the title. And under the header, Preparing to Leave for America. And so she's talking about what she's bringing with her and what she's wearing and what she's excited for. The second piece we'll sing is Boarding the Ship, and it's text by a woman named Teresa. This is a pretty incredible story about a woman. It was incredibly difficult to get a ship to go overseas, and you'll hear that on Saturday night with several of our stories. People would wait months and months and months at a port to try and get on a boat. And so in this story with Teresa, they are scheduled to go on a ship called the Titanic. And they go out to the big boat from a small ship, and you'll see what happens, but they don't ultimately get on that vessel, which is a pretty incredible story. The third piece we'll do is by a woman named Mary, and she has a bit of an unusual take with being on the ship. Like on Saturday night, you're going to hear most people had just a horrible time. They were in steerage, incredibly sick, horrible conditions, just very seasick the whole time. Somebody mentions that they just throw me overboard. I don't think I can make it all the way. Mary, she must have been in first or second class. She talks about how wonderful the trip was and how they would go up on the deck and do Irish dancing and with fiddles, and you'll hear a little fiddle tune there. So we're going to sing the first three for you, starting with Anna. So the next three, the last three we're going to do for you. The first one is by a gentleman named Max, and we are going to hear from Max on Saturday. He was noted, I think Boyer wrote in some of his notes that we read, that Max had a lot of interview time. He gave several hours of interview. He was a very, very vibrant, lively person and had lots of stories to tell. So in this selection, Max is talking about looking at the Statue of Liberty, which many of the immigrants talked about, that experience of seeing that and them finally getting there after these incredibly long, hard journeys. The last two pieces are texts by children. And one of the narrations you're going to hear on Saturday night is from a child as well, somebody who came over when they were 4.5 years old. And with these children, many of them did not know maybe if their father, in these cases, went over before them to try and get work and send money home, had no idea what their father looked like, didn't know who he was. And this experience of being in this giant center, trying to find who you're looking for, how do these families link up, what is that going to be, what's that going to feel like, and it's just incredibly moving. So we'll hear from Alan and Irina last. But first, Max S. as he gazes at the Statue of Liberty. think we have just a few minutes left. Does anybody have any questions about anything we talked about? Any lingering questions before Saturday?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I mean, whether it's Beethoven 9 or this piece of music, it's Boyer did a really good job, Kevin, of putting the right chord in the right place. You know, the intensity, the colors, the nuance of the whole thing, and then that's my job as in rehearsal to explain what that moment is or what this is too. Because, like, for example, the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra or any great opera orchestra has to know the opera and the arias as well as the singers do. You can't just show up and play your notes. You have to know what you're playing about. And in this case, because it is narration, they have to know the theme and music, and they've obviously studied it beforehand like they would study a Beethoven symphony or an opera. So they do know what the story is about, although, again, like I said earlier, so we can prepare as much as you want. You can prepare your speech as well as you want it, your toast at your wedding or whatever you're going to do. But when emotion comes into the fact of it, the performance element, the actors come to life in rehearsal and in performance. It will change its dimension and its intensity and its dynamic. And that's something you can't really prepare. See, I can prepare the notes, the rhythms, and the idea, and we can sort of pretend we know what it's about. But until it actually happens, you don't know. You only fall in love, you'll know when it happens. You can prepare and practice all you want, but it's not the same. So you kind of have an idea, you get prepared, you're professionals, but it's also going to change from rehearsal to performance because of your presence. Your presence, the audience reaction, the gasp, or that moment of silence, that inhale and you don't exhale, or the excitement of that laugh, or the laugh in the audience, because there is comical moments like you experienced, and like that beautiful text you just read. There was an array from A to Z of emotions in those beautiful songs you just sang. It was glorious, by the way. Thank you so much, Bravo. But you're going to enhance the performance, so therefore it'll be for us, just the three of us, and I'm the orchestra as well, will change even on the spot on Saturday night. Good question, Kevin.
And we sort of live for those moments. I think that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, exactly right. Nancy, you had a question?
Good question. We're not. I love the approach that we are taking in that we are not trying to emulate these characters to the point of characters. We are the conduits, the blank slates, the voice that's going to give life to these characters, but we'll leave it up to your beautiful imaginations to kind of run with what that is. Yeah.
I think that's a good question, very good question, and I think that's where the first time they did it with a stage director, an idea with 7 actors who did costumes and things. But then you get fixed on that's what that person looked like, that's who they were, that's what they wore, and that's not what the point is. The point is, through the text is the only way we're going to really kind of think we have a relationship with these people, and you're all going to have a different idea of who that little boy was or who that Italian woman was. And it might be somebody you know or have experienced or just an imagination. It's like the beauty of reading a book. We all can read the same book, the same passage, and come away with something different. Or watch an art film or a film and notice something different. And the same thing with music. You're going to all feel differently about the same piece of art at the same time.
And it can vary so much, just the little change in nuance. He said the word nuance and expression. The way that Emily may say a word on Saturday night may not be the way she says it on Friday night, and it can change the trajectory a bit on how you receive it. And so I think that there's enough there that we don't necessarily need costumes. although that does give a flair, I appreciate this moment to be maybe honoring the text in a way that doesn't dress it up in a way that the text speaks itself. Yes, yeah.
Because, like myself as a conductor, I'm not Dvorak. But with research and study and years of experience, I'm going to try to present to you the Dvorak Symphony Number 9, which he didn't title that, by the way. His original title was Symphony in E minor. It was later tagged as a subtitle from the New World Symphony. He did approve it, but he was not originally his title of the whole thing. But I'm just going to be there to do, because he conducted the premiere with the New York Philharmonic at Carnegie Hall in 1893. And he was apparently a very minimalist conductor, didn't do a lot of stage jumping and presence that you'll see today in the world, because he was true to his music. But my job is to try to channel Dvorak to the orchestra so that you get the experience of what his symphony from his ears would be like. Not what I think it is, but what Dvorak it is. And I think by doing it this way, and I appreciate your willingness to do it this way, by being just you speaking other people's words, is giving more power to the text and less to the outside visual. You agree?
Absolutely.
Less is more again.
Less is more. Less is more.
Yes, the visuals are actually picked, and these were beautiful, by the way.
Thank you, Todd.
And yes, Todd, thank you very much. Beautiful. And I love the fact the image where some of them were moving on top of each other. That's an amazing technique. I need to learn that. That's wonderful. Peter Boyer has selected some images. Yes, they're sparse, but they do come at optimum moments. You'll see a few in the beginning to set up the mood in the very beginning, but they are there and they were selected by him. But again, it doesn't detract. He uses it very minimally, and he admitted to me that the images didn't have anything to influence the music. It was driven solely by the text.
Well, I think we're ready to wrap up this evening.
This was a lot of fun, and we didn't even
Yes.
have weather to deal with, right?
Thank
So,
goodness.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Fowler.
Thank
Thank you,
Maestro.
Emily.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, buddy. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
We'll see you on Saturday.